In this film, the third in the series, Witchcraft: A Beginner's Guide, we are going to look at the use of herbs within witchcraft and other pagan traditions. The history of herbs and herbalism is inextricably linked with the history of magic and religion in its many forms. Within all magical and religious traditions, herbs and plants have been used by those who have understood both their magical and medicinal components. Through plants and their vibrational energies, practitioners of the occult in all its forms have connected to the divine and the universe for thousands of years, using plants to raise their own consciousness and magical ability. It is our ancient ancestors that we have to thank for our herb lore today, our hunter-gatherer cousins that discovered what each plant could do and what magic it contained, passing this information down through the ages via the wise men and women of the times that kept the knowledge alive right through to the modern day. Much of modern medicine owes allegiance to the simple plant lore of our ancestors, and many scientists believe that there is still much more to learn. It is, however, important to understand that modern medicine still has its part to play, that whilst we may use herbs as a form of preventative medicine and natural remedies may help ease ailments, there is still an important place for modern medicines. Working holistically with both forms, ancient and modern, brings a wholeness to the body and mind when needed. Witches work closely with nature, the land, the changing seasons, the creatures living around us, and, of course, the plant life. We understand that mankind is totally dependent on plant life for our very existence. Trees and plants are the lungs of the mother, and without them we could not live. The abundant vegetation that grows all around us provides us with the air we breathe, the food we eat, the medicines to help heal and mend the body and mind. Therefore we believe, as do other cultures, that each plant should be honoured, and if we need to take from a plant for magical purposes, we ask the plant's permission. If permission is given, then what we pick will come easily, and our magical intent will be blessed. If, however, the plant does not relinquish itself easily, we then feel that our request has been denied, and we move on to another. So for the witch, a knowledge of working with the plants that grow all around us is part of our tradition, and one that many of us are naturally drawn to explore on many levels. As witches, we use herbs within spells, charms, incenses, talismans, and much more. We use them for rituals, just like ancient man, to raise our consciousness and awareness to higher levels, enabling us to work our magical rites. Within spell work, we tap into the herb's natural magical ability to produce the desired outcome, or we use them to strengthen other ingredients of the spell. We use their vibrational energies to bring about change, or to carry our prayers to the universe. Today, as in the past, we know that plants and herbs have a dual purpose, both healing and magical, and that the two properties can be used in conjunction with each other, either separately or together, depending on the requirement. For instance, a herb that can dispel an illness can be used to banish negative energy on a magical basis too. The use of herbs within witchcraft goes hand in hand, and when one is walking a magical path, one cannot help but pick up at least a basic knowledge of this fascinating study. I met up with Jen, permaculture gardener at Tapley Park in North Devon, to chat about the medicinal and magical properties of some of the plants we both use. We're going to be looking at herbs and the use of herbs within witchcraft. Any good witch, any halfway decent witch will use herbs both medicinally, because they've got lots of healing properties, and also on a magical level. Now, you know a bit more about the medicinal side of herbs than I do, so if you can talk us through some of the herbs that you've picked for us this morning, that would be great, Jenny.
Sure. Well, I've got wormwood here. This is Artemisia absinthium. It was originally used to make absinthe. It's a stimulating herb, really good appetite stimulant. It's a tonic herb, really good for anyone recovering from illness.
Yeah.
It's also was originally used as a strewing herb, so it's very good for dispelling fleas and so on. And what you can actually
So
use,
would they just kind of strewn it across the
strewed
floor?
it across the
yeah.
floor. And what I use it for now is dried and chopped around the animal beds, dog
Yeah.
beds, cat beds, so that'll
Yeah.
keep fleas away. It's also really good to grow in the garden to deter black fly and white fly from other plants, and also bring beneficial insects to the garden.
It's got quite a strong smell to
It's
it
got
as well.
a very
the wormwood.
strong smell. Yeah, it's lovely.
Quite-
It's a lovely plant.
I've got it here. I've got wormwood dried, because we use wormwood. Let me just find the dry one. We use wormwood within a lot of incenses, and it's often it smells much more bitter
Oh, sure.
dried
yeah.
than it does in the fresh. The other. It actually catches in the back of your throat.
Oh yeah.
Yeah?
Goodness, yeah, that is
And
very
what we use wormwood for is in a lot of incenses, and it aids communication, particularly if there's an argument brewing. It will actually aid clear communication, and it will kind of dampen down tempers. So it will facilitate a good kind of outcome. It's also really good for if you're working in a magical group. Again, if you just throw a handful of the wormwood on a fire, it helps to bond the group, or use it in a bonding incense. And again, if there's trouble brewing, the best thing to do is kind of throw the wormwood
onto the fire,
onto the fire,
Oh, okay,
and then let
that's
people speak and facilitate and talk their truth. So wormwood's a really nice kind of versatile one, but it's very different when it's dried. It's much more bitter.
Sure. It is bitter. Yeah.
So what other ones have you got there?
So I've got yarrow here as well. This is yarrow. Yarrow is a really interesting herb. Actually, its botanical name is Achillea, and it was a herb that the centaur Chiron gave to Achilles to heal the wounds of soldiers at Troy. And so, what you can use it for, a leaf poultice put onto a wound that's really slow to heal will actually speed up that healing process. You can also chew a leaf to relieve toothache.
Oh wow!
Because it's antibacterial as well. It's also another really good tonic herb. So a tea made from yarrow is a really good spring tonic, very good for liver function and kidney function. But it's used all over the world to stem bleeding, and to just help the healing of deep wounds.
I've used it in like a boiling it in water and using it as a rinse for your hair. Because it puts a really nice shine on your hair.
Oh, lovely.
And in magic, yarrow, the only thing I've ever used yarrow for magically is hung in windows for protection.
Okay.
It's a really nice protective herb. So that's all I really know about yarrow.
Okay.
What's this one here?
This is lemon verbena. This is a very calming tea that you could take as a sleep aid. It's also got a lovely lemon scent to it. So
it's really strong.
Yeah, that would be a nice incense. I think they could use it for purification.
Yeah.
And again, another strewing herb as well. So that would be a good potpourri herb.
It's a good one for bringing luck. When I use lemon verbena in essential oil, I tend to put it in an oil called Van Van, and that's to bring really strong luck. So all the lemons, lemon verbena, lemon balm, melissa, all that kind of thing, really brings up good luck.
Oh right, great.
So and that's one of the main herbs for that as well, which is great. And what's this purple one? That's really pretty.
This is a beautiful herb. Actually, this is borage, and traditionally borage flowers were used to bring courage, and that is because they also have a very stimulating effect on the body. A tea made from the flowers and the leaves will increase adrenal function. So warriors would eat the flowers or tea made from the flowers before going into battle.
Well,
to raise the blood pressure.
To spur them on.
Yeah, and it's also a really good. It's often used to disperse melancholy. It's known as the sort of happy herb.
So it's like an antidepressant.
Yeah, and it's an antidepressant. It's also another good tonic herb. The leaves could be eaten in a salad or made into a tea. They've got a nice cucumber flavour. Let me try some. So they're really good added to any kind of summer drink.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah, it's nice, really, really nice.
Don't you put borage in pims, isn't it?
You do, yeah, you do. You can freeze the flowers in ice cubes, which is a nice way to use them.
So I'm guessing if it's a plant that kind of instills someone with courage on a magical level, what that could be used for, and I don't know because I've never worked with borage, but on a magical level that could be quite self-empowering, couldn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
So if you find yourself stuck in a situation that you don't want to be in, then borage will be the plant that you can either, I guess, eat or use in a tea or burn as an incense to kind of bring self-empowerment and courage to move away from a situation.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a real warrior herb, you know, that it really will give you the impetus to get on. That's a lovely plant. It's also very good for bees and butterflies.
So it encourages the wildlife into the garden. Yeah,
definitely. That's a lovely plant. What else have we got here? Interesting. This is meadow sweet, and this is a very, very good natural painkiller. So tea made from these flowers. It's very relaxing. It'll aid sleep, and it's one of the original ingredients, you know, in old pain-killing remedies, and you could use that at the onset of a cold just to soothe and calm and restore the body through sleep, and it's got a beautiful sweet smell to it, hence the name meadow sweet.
Oh, that's lovely. It's really, it smells of sunshine.
It does. It's got a really sunny, it's a very summery, very summery herb, and you can see that flowering in kind of damp places, the edge of woodland, by streams. We've got lots.
So really, witches, cunning men, cunning women, all the people from the from way back when would have had quite a vast knowledge of the medicinal healing properties of the plants, because that's the only medicines they had. So I guess really on one level, modern medicines owe practically everything.
Oh, absolutely.
To the old kind of wise women and the wise men from days past to actually kind of find the properties of these plants. And what I love about the idea of using plants magically as well is usually if a plant can get rid of disease and illness, it'll probably be a very good banishing plant for any kind of negativity. So what it does on one level, it also on a mundane level, it will also do on a magical level.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, that's really interesting. And this is a good example actually. These marigolds.
Yeah.
And they're very good for skin problems, skin complaints.
Because you can make an ointment, can't you?
You can make an ointment, yeah. And of course, because they've got this beautiful bright yellow colour, they're, I think, used in sun rituals. And summer rituals. So, and they're a component in most skin healing creams and work really, really well.
It's good for eczema, isn't it? Good for things like psoriasis and dry, and just kind of dry skin, dry itchy skins. Yeah.
Sure, so that's lovely.
When gathering or harvesting your herbs, it is important to know what it is you are picking, particularly when working with wild plants. If there is any doubt in your mind about what it is you are looking at, then leave it alone. It could be something else entirely. I believe that for this reason it is best and safer to plant and grow your own herbs. This adds to the fun and the all-over learning experience of working with plants. Never take all of a plant. It is important to leave most of it behind so that it will continue to grow and supply your needs for the future. Okay, Jen, if I give you those just to move a second, we're going to look at some of the dried herbs that I've bought and kind of look a bit more deeply into the kind of magical side of it, because that's kind of what I know more of. We looked at the Artemisia absinthium, which is the wormwood. Thank you. So the other Artemisia is mugwort.
Oh, okay.
It's a really lovely plant, and dried, it's quite soft and fluffy. And this is an excellent herb to use to raise psychic awareness. So if you're going to work psychically, you can make a tea with mugwort, and then you can strain it through and you can drink the tea, and that kind of brings up your own psychic awareness. The other thing that you can do with mugwort is infuse some of it in hot water. You can pass me the kettle over. Just pour some in. So when you're making your tea and you infuse it, the other thing that you can do with the tea itself is, if you leave some, is any scrying equipment, crystals for instance, scrying mirrors, this kind of thing, to empower them and to bring their energy through, you literally just
Swipe over.
wash your scrying equipment with the water. This then empowers it and brings forward its abilities to kind of aid you. The same with crystals. It's a wonderful wash to kind of, if you buy new crystals and you want to get rid of any kind of energies that may have been on them beforehand, because they do pick up energies, even in shops. One of the nicest things that you can do is just wash them with the mugwort. And I would do this just before I was going to use it. You know, full moons maybe would be a really nice time to do it. And obviously you can then drink the tea to kind of aid your own awareness. Mugwort can be slightly bitter, so what I would do is kind of add a little bit of honey to it. So just to give it that bit of sweetness, to make it a bit more palatable. Mugwort is one that I use a lot. The other one, which is a very interesting herb, is vervain, and it has a long history. It's used, or was used, by the Druids, and they would use it to help inspire their poetry or their music or their storytelling. Again, in the tea, it's a very woody herb, and they would use it in something called a listral cup, and there were several ingredients in a listral cup, and vervain was the main ingredient, and it would prepare a candidate for initiation, usually first degree initiation or bardic initiation. And in the Welsh story of Ceridwen, Ceridwen's cauldron, vervain was one of the main ingredients in her cauldron of inspiration. So the Druids will use this in a drink to inspire them, to bring forward their poetry, to bring forward their storytelling or their music. And also for first degree initiation, it gives a person courage, because it's about dying to the old world, the mundane world, and being reborn again into the magical world. So you're walking a path that takes courage, and vervain will actually kind of give you that courage. Again, it's quite a bitter drink. But if you're using it for initiation, it's not supposed to taste nice.
No,
it's supposed to make you aware.
Sure.
And vervain is very good with that. And Damiana. Now this is fun. Again, with all these herbs, they don't particularly taste wonderful.
Sure.
But Damiana is an aphrodisiac.
Oh, right,
It'll put the zing back in your love life. It's got a very distinctive smell, Damiana.
Oh yes,
it's quite strong and quite bitter. You can drink it in a tea if you're going to perform tantric sex, or if a couple is going to perform the great rite. It actually enhances that sexual energy. It's not a plant of bringing love into your life, but of enhancing a sexual relationship, particularly a magical sexual relationship. You can also add it to strong alcohol, so you can steep it in alcohol, and that kind of makes the brew much more intense. So it's one to be used with caution,
sure,
because it's quite a strong aphrodisiac.
Sure.
Yeah, but nevertheless, it's there if a couple wants to use it within their own kind of sexual rites or rituals, or within the great rite. As a rule of thumb, the waxing moon is a good time to plant, and the full moon is a good time to harvest. As the moon grows in its fullness, so do the herbs and their energies rise. Research has shown that the concentration of healing extracts in herbs is by far greater at the time of the full moon. One of the most kind of witchy herbs is mandrake. I've got a few pieces of mandrake root here. It's rare that you can find the whole root. It's called mandrake for the obvious reason the root grows in the shape of a man. So you get head, arms, legs, and a penis. If you can find the roots nowadays, they'll cost you a fortune. So more often than not, you'll get them chopped up like this. Mandrake is a poison, so you have to be very careful how you use it. I wouldn't recommend using it in any other way except the ways I'm going to tell you now. It's a wonderful protective root. What you can do, a lot of the time it's quite spherical, the root. You can slice them off. It's quite woody, so it'll cut quite easily. And put a hole through it and wear it around your neck as a charm of protection. Mandrake has very strong protective qualities. The other one it's good for is fertility.
Oh, right.
So if somebody wishes to increase their fertility, having mandrake about their person or under the mattress or hanging above the bed is said to increase fertility. One of the things that you can make with mandrake is something called moon water.
Okay.
And moon water is really simple. You take a piece of mandrake, you put it in natural spring water, simple as, and it will absorb the water, and you leave it on a windowsill from moon rise to moon set for the whole 28-day moon cycle. Now, you can't let the sun touch it, so it does mean that you've got to make the effort to get up before sunrise.
To
really
take it off the windowsill.
Yeah, you take it off the windowsill.
Place.
Absolutely.
Right.
When you've made your moon water, decant it into a bottle and cork it, usually a dark glass bottle. And what you can use that for then, take the mandrake out and dry it, because actually you can use this again and again and again, and it's not cheap mandrake, so it's a good way to recycle it.
Okay.
You can use it to, the moon water will protect you, will protect your house, it's good for clearing negative energies. If you pour a little bit into a bowl and use bay in particular, because bay is very good for dispelling negative energy, and flick it around the house. If you're feeling quite negative yourself, you can literally just a little bit of the water on your head. If you feel that you want added protection around your home, what I tend to do is literally with my finger draw pentagrams at windows, doors, and anywhere that any energies can come into the house. And what people tend to forget is pour a little bit down the toilet, a little bit down your sinks, at the, you know, where the overflows in the sinks, all of those places where energies can come in. Mandrake water will help to literally wash away the negativity. And it's something you can make with one piece of mandrake time and time again. The energy of the actual root doesn't diminish at all. So it's a really important one. Mandrake has some of the most amazing legends surrounding it. Back in the old days, it was said that it would only grow at the bottom of gallows, where a murdered, where a murderer had been hung, and it would grow where his seed had fallen. So when allegedly when you hang someone, that they spill their seed, and the mandrake will grow from that. The only way it was said you could pick mandrake was if you used a black dog tied to a black lead, and the lead tied around the mandrake, because it is said if a human picks mandrake, it screams so loudly that you will die from its cries. So it has a lot of very macabre legends around it, but magically it's a really useful herb. But it is classified as a poison, so you do have to be careful. Certainly not drinking it, certainly not ingesting it in any shape, way or form. And with all of these plants, any of the magical herbs, you have to use them with respect. So you have to respect their vitality and their individual plant energy. If you wanted to work with something like mandrake, the way that the old people would have been to ingest a piece of it. But today what we do now is we will hold it in our hands and we'll meditate with it or journey with it and see what the plant actually has to teach us as individuals by using it in that way. And it could be that you and I could both do a journey with mandrake and we'd both pick up different information, but that would be information that we need to use on our magical journey. So it's a wonderful piece, and I use mandrake a lot. Hanging it in the house is a good protective. Usually over front doors or back doors is a good protective charms, or carrying a piece on you. Beautiful. Really like the mandrake. Hard to get hold of though.
I know that there's an alternative burdock root.
Yes.
It's very similar, isn't it?
Yep.
Which is very common and grows almost everywhere. So this is burdock. This is a good alternative to mandrake because it grows wild here. Really easy to collect, and traditionally used as with mandrake as a protection.
Oh, okay,
root.
yeah.
So you could do the same. You could chop it and wear it around your neck, or hang it above the door. It's also very edible. If you can collect larger roots than this fresh. Yeah.
Because they do grow really big.
They do grow really big. So if you can find nice big fresh roots, you can lift those in the autumn, and roast them, and they're really similar to sweet potato.
Oh wow!
So that's a really good wild.
So in many
food.
ways, it's a safer alternative to mandrake.
Yeah, because it's non-toxic, it's non-poisonous. It's very good for treating skin conditions as well.
Yeah.
So you could make a tisane or a skin wash with these. And Henry VIII apparently used it to cure his syphilis. So.
It did work then.
Obviously not, no. But yeah, that's very good for, and also it's a very good wash for the hair, for people who are losing their hair. That's a good stimulating.
I like the idea though that it grows quite prolifically.
Yeah.
Because mandrake in this country now is very, you can find it, but you've got to know what you're looking for.
Sure.
And you know,
probably
it's
quite difficult to find.
I think it is. Yeah, I think it is.
So
I've never found it wild myself, but hey.
Okay, and so burdock really is everywhere. You'd have no problem finding this. I mean, it grows in most gardens.
It's always a good idea to buy books on herbs and wild plants.
Absolutely.
And herbal books that talk about the medicinal side of herbs and plants, and also the magical side of it. And there are many good books out there. And if you're using the books when you're collecting and working, you're going to be learning so much more about them. And once you've learnt the basics of them, you then start to find out more and more for yourself as you use them. So you may use herbs slightly different to how I use herbs, but that's the beauty of it, because you learn as you go along. And it's also good, I think, to reconnect with the way our magical ancestors worked. It was good enough for them.
Absolutely.
And I think it's certainly good enough for us today. And it's worth exploring the herbal side of magic and witchcraft.
Definitely. There's so many beautiful traditions and folklore surrounding plants as well. So, you know, they're really interesting to read, and often the traditions around them can also relate to their healing properties.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's a fantastic thing to learn.
Excellent. There are many good books that will help you get started. And when you have begun to look at herbs within magic and how they aid us in so many different ways, I can guarantee that you will be hooked. I have to say, however, that on a medicinal level, my knowledge of herbs and plants is rudimentary. My basic knowledge is from a magical background only. The beauty of magical herb lore is that it is an ancient practice, and one that is proving more popular in modern society, so there is much written about it, and therefore it is reasonably accessible to all. Just remember to follow any warnings about certain herbs, and never ingest any without professional advice. Incense is another way in which we use herbs and plants. Man has unlocked the power of herbs and resins by burning them on hot coals to release the plant's scent and magical energy, allowing the practitioner to walk the realms of the other world, or to enter a state of meditation and relaxation, enabling them to work ritually or magically. Incense has been used within many religions, both to purify and to sanctify, and the very smell of blended herbs and resins burning on hot charcoal can suggest to the mind a sense of ritual and magic. One of the other ways that we can work with plants is in making incenses. Incenses are used within witchcraft to purify, to raise awareness, to aid magical work, and to create a ritualistic space and a frame of mind. They go back to ancient Egyptian times, so they have a long, long history. The church has used incenses for centuries as well, for pretty much the same reasons that we use them today. What we're going to do today is make an elemental incense. I've chosen herbs and resins that vibrate all at an elemental level. It's important to understand that all the elements are involved in growing anything. So when you're growing your herbs and your resins anyway, you're using earth, air, fire and water. But certain plants and resins will vibrate more to the water energy, or more to the earth energy, or more to the air energy, depending on what plants and resins they are. The idea behind building any incense is you pick your resins and your herbs carefully so they vibrate on the energetical level, or for the reason that you're building it. So if you're building a prosperity incense, you will be using plants, herbs, resins that vibrate at a prosperity level. So we're going to be doing a nice elemental incense. This helps us engage with the plants themselves. It helps us to learn more about the elements and the elementals that we're working with in magic. And this is a wonderful all-purpose incense for your rituals, particularly when you're calling in the quarters and working within your circles. It will be a really, really good incense to use for cleansing and consecrating and for blessing, because you're using the energies that you've put in and also the energy of each of the plants to represent the elementals. So use a pestle and mortar, and I'm going to give the recipe out. The first one that we're going to use is a resin, and it's copal. I've already weighed it out. There are 6 dessert spoons of copal here, and copal is of the element of fire. So you need to crush it down as finely as you possibly can. And the other resin that is also associated with fire is frankincense, and it's 2 dessert spoons of frankincense. Frankincense is quite a hard one to actually pound down, so just do the best that you possibly can with it, okay? And when you're working it, think of fire energy, think of sun, think of warmth. Really put your intention into the incense that you're making. Start to feel the energy. Tune into that universal heartbeat. A little bit as we were talking about earlier on. Feel the energy, rock if you want to. You can chant if you want to, particularly the earth, air, fire, water chant that we learnt earlier on. All of this helps you to find the rhythm of it and to actually put the intention into the incense that you're making. When you feel that you've pounded that particular resin enough, I want you to add it to this bowl here. Lovely. The next resin that we're going to use is acacia. This is a nice easy one to pound down, and acacia represents in this incense the element of air. And again, while you're working the acacia gum, you're really thinking about the element of air and what it means to you, and you're putting that energy into the resin. And that's now ready to go into the bowl. We've now done the resins. They're a nice fine powder, and what we need to add now are the dry leafy ingredients and the seeds. Okay, it's important that you get the ratio right. You need far more resins to your herbs and seeds. If you use too many herbs and seeds, you're going to get the instant smell of the resin, which is sweet, and then it's going to end up smelling like a bonfire because you've got too many dried ingredients in there. Okay, so just a pinch of cardamom, and cardamom represents water. Roughly half a teaspoon of cardamom. This needs pounding. And then hibiscus, and just a pinch of hibiscus. And these should pound up relatively easy. And hibiscus represents water as well. So you're thinking of the water energy. It's much harder to pound the dried ingredients together. They take a lot more effort. With the cardamom, what you will need to do before you put it into the bowl is take the husks out. If you can buy cardamom without the husks on, it's easier. And then when you're ready, you just need to add the ingredients to the resins. I think that's fine, Zena. Scrape as much as you can and add it to the resin itself. Okay. And the last ingredient is caraway. And caraway is air. And that should pound up nice and easily. It's got a really beautiful pungent smell when you start to pound it. It's a nice easy one. That's fine. As easy as that. The last ingredients to go into our incense are essential oils. They also have a really long history going back to ancient Egyptian times. Many ancient cultures believe that the essential oils are the very essence of the plant's spiritual energy. So we're putting the plant form into the incense in its absolutely concentrated form. The first essential oil we're going to use is patchouli. We're going to have 8 drops of patchouli, and patchouli represents the element of earth. And then after patchouli, we're going to have cedarwood, which also represents earth, and we're going to have 6 drops. And then the last one is lemon, also 6 drops, and this represents water. And then you simply mix the whole together so that the oils are thoroughly blended with the incense, and you've created an incense from many different parts that is now one energetic substance. Now, incense can be burnt straight away, fresh, but I always think it's best kept for at least 6 weeks in an airtight container in a dark cupboard. It just helps everything to settle in, all the smells, all the energies, the magical vibrations to infuse together even more. But you certainly can burn it fresh. To burn incense like this, you need charcoal, which you light. Here's one that's already lit. And you simply pour it on top and it burns. The very act of burning the incense releases all of the energy that you have put into the work, that the plants naturally contain, and it releases it into the atmosphere, out to the universe, and it carries your energy, your desires, your wishes, your prayers with it. And this is why we use incense within ritual and spiritual work. As with all magical work, the plants and resins used in incense are chosen for their magical vibrations and are blended together with intent and purpose to create a blend that will aid in the spiritual and magical work of the practitioner. The more you explore the world of herbs, both magically and medicinally, the more fascinating the subject becomes. You begin to realise that there is a wealth of knowledge out there just waiting to be tapped into. As you gain knowledge about herbs and their uses, so too do you learn about yourself and many other aspects of the craft. To know when to plant and when to harvest with the moon, how to dry your herbs, store them, work with them, all becomes second nature and therefore helps to connect you further with the path you have chosen. Let us now look to see how my friend Anne, who is a druid, uses her herbs and what they mean to her. I've come to visit my friend Annie, who is a druid, and she uses herbs in her everyday life. Hi Annie. Can you tell me anything about druidry, where it comes from and why you got involved in it?
Well, essentially druidry is a nature-based spirituality. It's very creative. We work with the land, we work with the cycles of the year. And from within the context of that, all the other things grow. It's partly to do with the inspiration we receive from the elements, from the changing seasons. and from the beauty of the land. So for us as Druids, we attempt to nurture that, to, if we can, look after the planet, where maybe 20 or 30 years ago Druidry was well on the fringe in terms of perhaps the idea of recycling and looking after things. Now it's quite cutting edge because people have moved forward quite a lot. So Druidry as a path is quite, on some levels, quite serious in terms of conservation and observing, you know, the cycles, as I said. And on other levels, it's very light-hearted because it's extremely creative, and there's an immense value of the beauty in things and the beauty in people. Yeah, it's the creativity within people as well as, you know, literally things that they create.
So in that sense, it's not that different from witchcraft itself, is it?
There are lots of connections. Yeah. There are lots of overlaps and connections. We observe the equinoxes, we observe the solstices, we work with the elements as you do, we work with the land as you do. So, you know, there are many, many common threads, really.
Is it slightly more solar, do you think, Druidry, than the witchcraft being lunar, or is it kind of similar on those levels as well?
It's similar on those levels. It's I wouldn't say it's more solar, actually. I think because, again, we a lot of work goes in during the dark time. Yeah. So, again, it's probably has lots of similarities there as well. I think it wouldn't, you know, if you were part of one element, it doesn't mean you're excluded from the other.
The two work quite nicely together. Really well. I've worked magically with Druids, and, you know, and they've worked with me, and the energy seems to be able to gel quite nicely, I think, within ritual and within workings. Yes. So what drew you to the Druid craft, if you like?
I think I was looking for something, and I felt the need for some sort of structure, but not because I'm not a particularly disciplined person, I didn't want a structure that contained me, as it were. I needed something that was just gentle, but within which I could work, you know, myself and learn, because I like learning things, and Druidry is a path of learning because there are so many elements to it. It's divided into 3 sections, for example. Again, it's not a ranked thing, but there is a progression if you're in terms of learning Druidry. And to begin with, for example, what we normally do is we look at what is called the bardic element, which was hugely important in ancient times because the bards had tremendous status. They were if you like, they were the spin doctors of the time. They worked for, you know, the rulers of the land, and, you know, you could be actually totally destroyed if a bard went off, when it was employed to go off and, you know, create some poetry, create a piece of writing, or an oral piece, in fact, you know, against you, your reputation could be ruined. But
this comes up time and time again in kind of Welsh mythology and Irish mythology as well, doesn't it?
Yeah. So the role of the bard wasn't just that. Obviously, it was to write poetry, it was to tell stories, because the oral tradition was what it was.
Keep histories as well, wasn't
it? The bards kept the histories. They kept the histories, not just, you know, family histories. They would be able to recite histories for the land, for the ruling classes, for all kinds of things. It was a huge exercise in memory, as well as being creative. Yeah. I mean, they were asked during their training. I mean, they took 10 to 12 years to train, but sometimes more. But each year they had a specific number of poems to learn, stories to tell, poems to create, stories to create. So they had all of these jobs. Hundreds per year were needed. Yeah. You know, so that was a very, very important role. Then if you were to progress, if you call it that, because there has to be some sort of system, an orderly system of some sort, you can't do everything at the same time, then the middle element would be the element of the vate, the ovate, as we call it. And the work of the ovate was very different. It was much more on the inner planes. The ovate would be the person who prepared someone for passing over, prepared someone for sacrifice. Yeah. Because in ancient times that did occasionally happen. It wasn't didn't happen all the time, but that did happen. The ovate would be the shaman, you know, of the tribe.
So they would look after the spiritual side of the tribe.
They would look after the spiritual side, yes. And they also were the healers. They worked with herbs. So quite often you'd have them. They would very often be living on the periphery of the village or the you know, of the group, because their work was all quite secret. quite often was kept to themselves. They didn't have that sort of, where the bardic was very social, very gregarious role, the Ovid role was very hidden.
Yeah.
And then the Druid role, which in ancient times could take up to 19 years to become a fully fledged, as it were, Druid, involved advising the ruling classes. It involved all sorts of things.
They were quite politically placed, weren't they?
Very politically placed, yes. And so they would be they were very powerful. But they would also work, and this is the connection, I think, with the craft for you, is they would also work magically.
Yeah.
They worked with the elements. There's a huge range, whilst still having a finger in the pie, as it were, of the Ovid and the bardic role as well.
Because so they kind of went across the board, did they?
They went across the board,
everything,
and a bit more. So there was a lot of, but a great deal of prestige also as well. But they would then hold meetings. They would speak to the public. They would deliver important, things. They would also hold very democratic meetings with people. They would impart the required knowledge or whatever, but it would be very open, but the Druids would run those kind of things. So they had this sort of managerial status.
So the Druids as kind of ovates and bards, and what was the first one? The
first one is the bard.
That's it.
The second one is the ovate, and then
so they pretty much helped to run the whole of society, didn't they?
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. One of your particular interests within Druidry is the herb craft, isn't it?
Is the herb craft, yes.
What pulled you to that? What pulled you to the herbs?
In some ways, it's difficult to answer that, because it's even before I sort of began to define myself as following a Druid path, I've always been interested.
Yeah.
I've always been drawn to trees and always been drawn to plants. And when I began to study the ovate grade, which is the area where we do begin to look at herbs in more depth, it really just resonated. I just felt very comfortable with it. It sort of made me realise why I love the autumn so much, because it's the time of gathering. And it seemed to make a lot of sense. I love all the other seasons, but the autumn really calls to something on the inner plane with me, where I can go out there and gather the hops and gather the herbs and start to dry them, and through the winter months then
plan the preparations for them. I think when you start looking at herbs, for me as well, it becomes a fascination on how much we can learn from them and what we can actually do with them. That's a fascination for me.
Yes.
And I only use a certain amount within my magic and within making the things that I make, but they never cease to surprise me about how much they can still give us on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, you don't have to be, in fact, you don't have to be following any particular path to be able to use them. And I think what's very exciting about this is that people are becoming much more aware that we can supply ourselves with various medications, for example, from the hedgerows, which essentially means we're not taking in lots and lots of chemicals. We can look after our own health.
We're not so reliant on doctors and everything else.
Yes, which is just as well in the current climate. So, and we're not so, we don't have to be as manipulated by the pharmaceuticals. If we can help to do preventative stuff.
Because I think once you start to work with herbs, you understand that you're approaching the body in a much more holistic way, aren't you?
Yes.
And there might be times when we need to go to the doctor.
Yes.
And there might be times that we can just pick what we want from our own hedgerows.
Exactly.
Or take what we want from our own cupboard that we've prepared already and treat ourselves on that level.
Yes. I think it's a process. I think if we can work on using herbal preparations to an extent to keep us healthy, then we only, when it becomes very important and we have some serious need, then we can use, allopathic medicine, which is obviously very necessary. My feeling is there's a need for both.
There is, I think so.
It's about blending an alternative way of thinking with the conventional, and there's a need.
I think so.
But I think it is very exciting, and there's an endless process. There's an awful lot to learn, and in fact, the Druids essentially would concentrate on 6 or 7 herbs, major herbs, not to the exclusion of any others, but those were the particular ones because they had magical as well as healing properties.
And which herbs were they?
This is agrimony. Agrimony is a perennial. It's native throughout most of the British Isles and Europe, and it grows up to 3 feet tall. It's got starry yellow flowers and scent is similar to an apricot. It's a perfect herb for taking a bath and for taking before working at a ritual. To make an infusion of agrimony, you can pour a pint of boiling water over 2 teaspoons of the chopped leaves and allow that to steep for 10 minutes. It can then be drunk as a tea, added to water for cleansing, or poured into your bath. And you can also strew your bath with leaves and flowers if you want. The herb is a powerful astringent, tonic and blood cleanser. And it was used to treat conditions where perhaps the patient might be drained of energy. An infusion of the leaves can be drunk as a tea or used as a gargle before performances by singers and speakers. The dried leaves and flowers can be used to make a herb pillow to help you sleep. In herbal medicine, one of its uses is to treat snake bites. Okay, this time we have heather. When we look at heather, we have to remember that the Picts were using heather to make an alcoholic drink over 4,000 years ago. And this has been discovered by archaeologists only quite recently. It's a tough evergreen plant and it's familiar to almost everyone because it grows on mountainsides and in wild places. In herbal medicine, heather is used for a range of complaints, including strengthening the heart and cystitis. It has all sorts of properties, medical properties. If you have access to heather, try adding flowering tips to your bath to help tone your muscles and to ease rheumatic pains. Edward Bach, who developed the first flower essences, found heather helps to go beyond a preoccupation with our own needs, helping us to be more concerned with others. In this way, heather promotes generosity of spirit. This is mugwort. Medicinally, mugwort is good for menstrual and menopausal symptoms because it is a closely associated herb with the divine feminine. It's also ideal for rituals associated with the goddess. Traditionally, mugwort is gathered on Midsummer's Eve. Like agrimony, the herb we mentioned earlier, mugwort is seen as useful for cleansing negative influences. But in addition, it is protective and enhances psychic abilities, which is why the use of the two herbs can be ideal, for example, for creating incense. It is a herb also said to aid clairvoyance, and an infusion may be drunk as a tea before divination or scrying. Fresh leaves or an infusion can be rubbed on crystal balls or scrying mirrors. It is a perfect herb for helping you work with any of the Druid traditional divination systems. A pillow stuffed with mugwort, as well as agrimony, will bring restful sleep, and it will also help to stimulate prophetic dreams. Meadowsweet is a very ancient British herb, living in the British Isles since the Ice Age, possibly before. In medieval times, it was often used as a strewing herb, so that one could walk on its almond-scented leaves and its sweet flowers. We find meadowsweet around damp riverbanks, the edges of streams, where it grows in profusion, and there's a lovely, sweet perfume. Meadowsweet is antiseptic and astringent, and it can be used, for example, to treat cystitis. The pain-killing properties of meadowsweet make it a useful herb to treat rheumatic muscle and joint pains. Since it contains anti-inflammatory flavonoids, it's actually better than aspirin. We can use the whole herb, root, flowers and flowering tops. Mistletoe is an evergreen growing on trees, and it is native to Europe, North Africa, Central and Western Asia. Mistletoe, along with the oak, is the plant most commonly associated with Druids, although we do know that there are other plants and trees which are equally significant. It was Pliny's account of Druids gathering mistletoe ritually that forged the association in the popular imagination and linked it with the other Druid icon, the oak tree. The berries of the mistletoe are undoubtedly responsible for powerful folklore and magical associations that exist between the plant and the ideas of fertility. The survival of the mistletoe traditions associated with fertility are well known. For example, we kiss under the mistletoe at Christmas. In some parts of England in early days, women who wanted to conceive would tie a sprig of mistletoe around their waist or round their wrist. In modern Druid practice, we tend to use mistletoe almost exclusively at Albanarthan, with sprigs being distributed to all present as tokens of good luck and fertility for the coming year. We can also use mistletoe as a token for protection. In ancient times, it was regarded as an all-heal and was credited with almost miraculous healing powers. When an infusion of the dried leaves and twigs is made, it can be used for medicinal purposes. The berries themselves, however, are poisonous, and it is actually better to use any medicinal use of this plant to a trained practitioner. Okay, this time we have vervain. It was known as the herb of grace. Pliny goes into lots of detail as to how the Druids harvested vervain. It was picked just before it flowered at the dark of the moon with Sirius rising. It had to be cut with a sickle and raised aloft in the left hand. This degree of care was no doubt taken because of the magical and medicinal power believed to be residing in this plant, because it was considered to be a cure-all. It has also been used for divination and prophecy. Woad was probably introduced to ancient Britain by Celtic tribes emigrating from Western and Southern Europe. Warriors may well have been using woad for its medicinal value as much as for any decorative effect. It acts as a styptic, helping to contract blood vessels, and is therefore very good at staunching the flow of blood from wounds. By the Middle Age, woad cultivation was so developed that woad guilds grew up across Europe, and woad barons controlled its lucrative trade. What woad is famous for is for the dye, for dyeing wool, and also as paint, warrior paint, when warriors went into battle. There's been a revival of interest in this plant recently, and now we can get seeds for planting, paints, dyes, and other related things. If you're interested in home dyeing, for example, you could dye your bardic robe with woad, or even paint your skin at festival time.
So these 7 herbs are the basics for the ancient Druids to study, that the ones they would absolutely have to look at and study and learn.
Yes, absolutely, because all of these 7 would have both medicinal and magical properties, so they needed to be looked at from both aspects. Although there were many other herbs which would have been used because they made use of all the indigenous herbs that we had, but these also have ritual properties and other significance. So yes.
And so these beautiful cards here, they're showing the 7 main herbs, but of course you've got all the other ones in this beautiful pack. And this is the Druid Herb Oracle.
That's right.
And they show all the other herbs that you can learn in modern Druid craft as well.
Absolutely, yes.
There's just about everything here, isn't there? I mean, it's absolutely beautiful cards. And I guess by using cards like this, it actually helps to attune you to the herbs themselves on a much more magical and psychic level, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. In fact, what's a really lovely way to work with these herbs is to randomly choose, either by shuffling the deck or even just looking at them, a card for the day, or a card for the week, and then you could choose, for example, to study that particular herb, whilst looking at not just its medicinal property, its magical property, but also, because there's another way of looking at these herbs, we can also use them.
So it's a completely different way of learning about the herbs, isn't it? Which is amazing, and it kind of psychically connects you into it as well.
Yes,
exactly. And I think it's important to say as well, particularly with some of the cards we've just been looking at, is if you're taking these medicinally, you've got to be very, very careful about what you are taking, don't you?
Yes,
because some of them are poisonous.
Yes, I think unless you have a qualification where you've obviously established a period of study, then you can use all of these herbs for magical purposes.
Yes.
But for actually taking them in by using them as infusions or as medication, then you do have to be much more careful.
Yeah, I mean, for instance, we talk about mistletoe, don't we? Mistletoe, yes. you shouldn't take internally at all.
No. Yeah. Best to consult someone who knows.
Or at least refer to a good book as well, isn't it? Yeah,
absolutely. Yes.
And you're going to be showing us how you use some of your herbs in tinctures and infusions and other bits and pieces, aren't you, soon? So.
I am, yes. We'll do some infusions and perhaps we'll make a salve.
Lovely.
And a tincture.
Fantastic. I actually have quite a lot of trouble relaxing after a long day at work and sleeping. I find that my sleep patterns are all over the place at the moment. So is there a tea that I can take that will help me relax at the end of a hard day's work before I go to bed?
Yes, I mean there are several combinations of herbs that you could use for this. To take before you go to bed, what I would recommend would be some skullcap, because it does help to relax you and make you receptive to sleep coming in a very natural way.
Yeah.
If you're having a very hard day at work and you've also had a lot of stress, as opposed to just, just the general pressure of work, but extra stress, then I would be inclined to mix a little St. John's wort with that as well. St. John's wort is very well known as an antidepressant, but we're not using it in that sort of context. We're just using a small amount of it just to help the relaxation to come in. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to mix a tea for you, where I'm going to use 2 teaspoons of skullcap dried, and mixing it in a little bowl for a purpose, which I will come to in a moment. So 2 teaspoons of the dried skullcap and 1 teaspoon, these are the dried flowers of St. John's wort.
Okay, yeah. Do you
want to smell?
They're really green, aren't they? They smell really green and fresh.
Yes, and yet these were last summer's, but they've been kept in an airtight jar since then. So that's all I'm going to put. But what I wanted to mention in particular was I would not, because now we've got this kind of mixture, which is an uneven sort of leafy mixture, I feel it's important, we've got to strain it obviously, and what I feel is a really important thing is not to use a metallic strainer. I could recommend either using a teapot like this, which has got, these are quite easily obtainable, it's got a sort of straining mechanism inside, or even a tea bag like this, which is a little sort of muslin tea bag, which is washable. You can take this off and put it in the washing machine, so you can use it again and again. This also has lots of other uses when you're working with herbs, so I think this is a really handy piece of equipment. So I'm just going to pop this into my teapot, add some boiling water and allow it to infuse for at least 5 minutes.
That's a really nice green, isn't it?
And it smells wonderful. It's a lovely green smell to it as well. Now, there are depending on your taste, you might find that a little bitter. So I would recommend that you just use some honey,
just to sweeten
according
it
to
up
how sweet you'd like it, but just to take the bitterness away from it. But it is so you allow it to stand 5 to 10 minutes. The longer you leave it, the stronger it becomes. So, I would say start with 5 minutes and see how effective that is for you.
How long before sleep would you? How long before going to bed would you recommend?
Half an hour.
About half an hour.
About half an hour. Yes, just sip it gently. About half an hour before you go to bed, and hopefully then it should help. The other useful thing with herbs, to know about herbs, is that they're not as instant as pharmaceutical kind of medicine. So you might find that you may take them for a few days and then you'll start to.
So it's patience with it, isn't it?
Yes, it's about attunement. It's about your body attuning to the work of the herbs as well. So it's also quite useful. You won't immediately, you might not immediately fall asleep. But once you start taking that infusion each night before you go to bed, then you build up and you start to really relax.
Lovely.
The skullcap particularly is effective for that. So we'll allow that to stand. There we go. Do take care because this is now very hot.
Oh, it smells really green and lovely. That's actually quite pleasant. I think the honey would sweeten it and make it more so, but that's actually really pleasant as it is.
Yes, that's fine. I mean, the honey is according to your palate, so if it works for you like that, all well and good. Honey is better than most other sweeteners, I would say, because again, you've got that natural. And there's a psychological side to this as well. You're feeling you're taking something also inside that's very healing for you as well. So, that combination can also help to make it effective, particularly if you don't like something that's a bit sharp or bitter.
Okay, thank you.
Now, actually, once you get more familiar with your herbs and when you start learning how to identify herbs that are in the hedgerow, herbs that are in your garden. There are lots of other mixtures that you can make. And the more familiar you become, the more in tune you become with how things can work in combination. But to begin with, I think it's a lovely idea, just for example, if you want to pick me up, just to go into the garden and gather some mint. Most people have mint in their gardens. Lots of people find that mint grows too much in their garden. They think, because it's quite an invasive plant.
It goes everywhere, doesn't it?
But actually, if you start to use it, dry it, and make a mint peppermint tea from it, which you can buy in ready-made infusions, but it's so lovely just to go out and gather your own because it's extremely fresh. That makes a wonderful pick-me-up. And if you could put 2 good teaspoons of mint leaves and pour boiling water. And again, you can sweeten with honey.
And it's a good digestive as well, isn't it?
It's a very good digestive. It's a very good cleanser as well.
Good, and good for your hair.
It's good for all kinds of things. So it's a lovely pick-me-up. Because it has a lovely there's a freshness to it. You've only got to inhale and breathe in the smell of mint. And
you talk about that you can buy a lot of these in tea bags from the supermarket, but half the fun, isn't it, is actually picking them yourself, learning about them, and seeing how they work for you. And it might be that you think of different ways to use them and in different blends and in different formulas that work for you. That's the beauty of it.
It's lovely because you might want to pick me up on a cold day.
Yeah.
So you could, for example, have some dried mint, but you could also use some hawthorn leaves. Yeah. Because hawthorn is well known as particularly good for heart medicine. Yeah. A lot of manufactured medicine have their base in the content or the properties of hawthorn leaves, hawthorn berries. So you could, again, it's exactly the same procedure. You take a couple of teaspoons, put them in your pot or into your tea net, and just boiling water and infuse for 5 minutes.
And I think when you're learning as well, there are so many good books out there with recipes that you can follow as well. And I think that's a really important place to start, isn't it? By buying some really well-informed books so that you've got a basis to start from.
Yes. One of the ones which I get very excited about, and it's not just about using this particular herb for infusions or anything, you can actually use it as a vegetable as well, is the nettle. Yes. And I think if you pick nettle leaves, and there are lots of ways of approaching a nettle. It's actually a really good idea to approach the nettle as the spirit of the nettle so that it knows what you're up to and you're much less likely to be stung. But if you snip the top, ask the nettle first. It's appropriate to ask all herbs or plants, if you're going to take away part of them, that you approach them and you say, I would like to take some of this for healing, so that it understands. And also, give thanks.
And never take everything.
No, don't deplete the whole stock. Take the tips of the nettle, and again, make a little infusion, put your boiling water, and nettle tea is so cleansing, detoxing. We all need to detox from time to time, so I would recommend a nettle tea at least twice a week, particularly in the winter months when we're eating lots of carbohydrates, and a lot of them sort of settle around us, as it were. Nettle helps to cleanse that. So nettle again makes it very, very good. But it's also, because of the cleansing, because of getting rid of any toxic elements that are in the bloodstream, the nettle is taking all those out of the way for you. Great. So nettle is another one that's just easy. You don't even have to look up to see what that looks like. They're out there.
They're out there. So we've looked at the teas, and now we're going to have a look at a tincture.
We can look at a tincture next. Yes.
Okay.
Yep, that's fine.
So you're going to show us next how to make a tincture. Can you tell me what a tincture actually is?
Yes, a tincture is kind of a medicine, I suppose. It's made, again, from herbs. It's an infusion, not in the same way as a tea is an infusion. It's a long-term infusion. And what we need is something that will extract the properties of the herb or the berry we're using, which can take some time because obviously we're using dried berries or dried herbs, and it takes quite a time to extract all the goodness from them that we need for the medication.
Would it be easy to use fresh herbs if you've got them? Is it better, or is it better to dry them first?
I feel it's preferable to dry them. Okay. The reason being, there's a lot of water content in fresh herbs, and that can create mould. So what it does, it affects the keeping time. Yeah. If you use, there are a number of alternatives in terms of the liquid that you use to create the tincture, but if you're using fresh herbs, the water content will dilute whatever else you're using. So I always think that
make sure they're dried thoroughly first.
They're dried thoroughly,
okay.
Yes. So that's quite important. And you can dry herbs. If you have an old oven, such as I have here, you can dry it in the warming part at the bottom, which isn't the active oven.
Or just hang them.
Or hang them. Yeah. You can hang them, or you can dry them in an airing cupboard.
Yeah.
A warm place, and you dry them until you can see because they begin to shrivel up, or they begin to be almost papery if they're a herb. And if it's a berry, for example, these are hawthorn berries.
You can see that they're quite hard.
They bounce.
Yeah.
And they shrivel up. So you know then that they're appropriate and suitable.
So a tincture is a form of a medicine.
It's a form of a medicine, and what we normally would say, sometimes you can use them as preventatives. What I recommend, for example, some that I have made already for this year, these are elderberry tinctures, and I would say we take 30 drops of this 3 times a day throughout the winter. And this, because of the high vitamin C content, that helps to keep away colds and flus and things.
Yeah.
Now,
can I have a smell?
You can indeed, yes.
Oh, you can definitely smell. They're gorgeous.
Would you like to try
it? Yes, please. Just one.
It's usually a good idea to have a bottle which has got a dropper in.
How many drops? About that?
Try that. See how you feel. Taste it.
Oh, it's strong, but really nice. Yes. So this is for its vitamin C content. So you take that as a vitamin supplement.
As a vitamin C supplement.
So what is the tincture you're going to be making today?
I'm going to make hawthorn berry tincture today, which is very, very good for the winter for circulatory.
I get bad circulation, cold hands, cold feet, that kind of thing.
Yes, cold hands, cold feet, cold nose.
Yeah.
And so what we're going to do that, we're going to make a small tincture with that, but it'll be a good example as to how you can make.
Okay.
There are a couple of other things, alternative things as well, because obviously, as you said, that was quite strong.
Yeah.
That's because that one is made with vodka.
I can taste that.
Yes. Now, if you're going to make a tincture with vodka, the advantages with vodka are that it keeps much longer.
Yeah.
You can have a shelf life of probably up to 2 years, certainly 12 months. If 2 years is quite safe, even longer possibly. It's important to use, now, when you see recipes for tinctures, they often talk about 100% thing. That was a great confusion to me, so I actually went to find out about this, and it is quite suitable. It doesn't have to be 100% alcohol.
Just a high level alcohol.
High level, 40% if you can get it.
Yeah.
A lot of them are not. A lot of them are about 37, but that's okay. Right, yeah. But the vodka had the advantage of that, as I said, is the longevity of it.
Yeah.
However, if you might want your tinctures for your children, or you might be,
particularly something like vitamin C for children is in this time of year is really important. Exactly. But you don't want to give it to them in vodka.
You don't want to give them vodka. And you actually might not be a drinker yourself.
Yeah.
You might have... So there are some very pleasant alternatives. One of which is vegetable glycerin.
Okay.
And this is... You can get this at health food shops. Mm-hmm. But failing that, you can also get it... You can probably get it online.
Okay.
And it's interesting. It's very... Would you like to taste this?
Okay.
A little taste.
Something called vegetable glycerin doesn't sound like it's going to taste terribly good though. Oh, it's very slow pouring. Oh, just all of it like that?
Yes, that's fine.
That's incredibly sweet.
Yes.
I'm not sure I like that. I think I prefer
because
the vodka.
You're not, yeah.
Oh,
but it's not horrible.
The matter of opinion on that one. I think my daughter might like it because it's very sweet. Like it, yes. Yeah, but that was
far too sweet for you, but not a horrible taste nevertheless. Because you might imagine that a vegetable-based thing might have a bitterness again. Like also. And the other alternative then is maple syrup.
I think I'd prefer the maple syrup.
You can have the opportunity to taste this if you like.
No, thank you.
You're familiar with that. Okay, so those are the alternatives if you don't drink or you prefer to have, non-alcoholic content. So. Making a tincture is extremely simple.
Good.
But it can be time consuming. And that's part of the fun of it. So all you need to do is you put these are my hawthorn berries. This is a very small jar, obviously, because we're just going to make a little. Right. Now, you may choose which you want to make this with. Would you like to make this with the vodka?
Definitely with the vodka, right, I think.
Okay. So what you need to do is you put your berries into a jar. Cover them with whichever of the vehicles you're going to use, whichever the meat you're going to use. Label it. This is extremely important. Label it with the date.
I was going to say put the date on it, yeah.
Yes. Because what you have to do next, every day, you have to shake it. So you keep it in a dark place, or not in bright light, and every day you give it a good shake for 3 months.
Okay.
At the end of 3 months, you then, again, you can use the little straining net or muslin or something like that. What will happen, you'll find, is that the vodka obviously will change colour.
Yes, it will take the colour of the berries.
It will take the colour of the berries. You strain it through, and then you bottle it, preferably in either brown or blue glass
something
bottles.
Dark to keep the sunlight
something
off
dark.
it, yeah.
And then store it in a cool place, and then you take your drops.
So this is something you make well in advance, because you have to keep it for the 3 months to get the properties from the
absolutely
ingredients that you're using.
Yes,
yeah.
But the Wheel of the Year works in that way.
Yes, it does.
You're gathering in September.
Yeah.
September.
And it's seeing you through the winter
yes.
until you can start gathering perhaps the spring bits and pieces that you might want, like elderflowers perhaps, that you might want to use
for the next
bit.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's kind of about building up stock.
Yeah.
Which is rather nice. But because it is really lovely. You see, this is already taking on a bit of colour.
It is.
So you gather in September, October, shake them till November.
Spend your time drying, shake them all, and you've got them for that winter.
You've got them for that winter.
Brilliant.
So you're starting to sort of take your preventative medicine from November on.
Yeah. So. Excellent.
So that's the tincture, but it is important to label it and to write it in your diary or on your calendar.
Yeah.
And sometimes you might go into your pantry or your cupboard and you think,
what's that?
My daily schedule, as it were. Yes.
Brilliant. Thank you.
The tincture.
So you're going to make a salve next, which is like a cream, isn't it?
That's right.
So what kind of salve are you going to show us how to make?
Well, this is a general purpose salve for stings, grazes, slight bruising perhaps, scratches, that sort of thing.
So something to soothe the skin.
Something to soothe, yes.
Ideal for children, I'm guessing.
Ideal for children, yes. Yeah. Ideal for children. There's nothing harmful in it. It's going to be very gentle. It's also going to be quite fragrant.
Okay.
So it's a gentle salve we're going to make. I'm going to tell you what I'm going to use as the basis for the salve to begin with, and then we'll talk about the ingredients as well. For salve making, we need a number of we have options for a number of different mediums for the actual oiliness of it. We can use normal olive oil, such as anyone might have in their kitchen cabinet. Or we can use an almond oil, for example.
Yeah, it's a good base oil, isn't it?
Good base oil, yes. And any good base oil, actually. Coconut oil, almond oil, olive oil, vegetable oil, even. So those we would use as the medium for the main part of the salve. What I did earlier, just to prepare, was I started to make a lavender oil.
Yes.
For this oil, I've just put lavender leaves, dried lavender, which is wonderful, and I've covered it with sweet almond oil. Now, if you prepare your infused oil this way, you put the cold oil on the herb, and you have to shake it every day for quite a few days, so that the essence of the herb starts to be collected in the oil, and then you have to strain it.
Yeah.
In order to speed up the process of that, of course, the other alternative is to warm the oil.
Yeah.
And simmer the herb in the oil for 5 to 10 minutes.
Pull the infusion into the oil itself, won't it? Yeah.
Yes. Now, we'll come to the ingredients in a moment. One of the things I want to mention, though, is if you're going to gather your ingredients, you can buy ready prepared, but if you're going to gather from the hedgerows, I always feel it's a good idea to use a paper bag. It's not essential, but a paper bag has a number of quite valuable elements to it. You might go out and gather your herbs today and want to dry them. They can be dried in here.
Because I guess the paper bag will absorb any moisture from the actual herbs.
Paper bag will absorb moisture. It will be dark because it's a brown paper bag is particularly good. So you've got your herb already gathered in a dark bag. Just pop it in the airing cupboard.
And leave it.
You haven't got to wait. What you'll find is if you gather your herbs in a plastic bag,
they'll sweat, won't they?
They will sweat. And what you'll need to do if you gather them in a plastic bag is take them out of the plastic bag as soon as you get home, and maybe dry them on newspaper. Or or something, or kitchen towel possibly.
Okay.
But the bag seems to serve a number of purposes, so I think that's a good idea. The essential ingredient beyond these things, which is common to all salves really, is something that will help to solidify it. Now, I use beeswax. There are alternatives to beeswax. I like beeswax simply because I usually get organic beeswax. I like to purchase it in small granules so that it's easy to melt down. So these are little granules of beeswax. And you can actually, with beeswax, you need to test how long and how much you need, because obviously you don't want the ointment to be so difficult you can't even put your finger in.
Because it dries quite hard, doesn't it? Yeah.
So the ability to sort of, gauge how much you've got is very good with beeswax, or any flaked, I suppose, any flaked sort of solidifier. But that's what I would normally use. What we're going to do next is we're going to make a small preparation here, a small mixture of each of the herbs that we're going to use for this salve, and we will then do the fast method by heating the vegetable oil, infusing the herbs in that, straining it, and then mixing it with the beeswax. Okay, we're going to put a couple of teaspoons of tansy, which is a very good herb for mixing with the other herbs in particular, and a very soothing herb. A couple of teaspoons of lavender flowers. And to that we're going to add a couple of pinches of marigold flowers.
And marigold's quite traditionally soothing for the skin, isn't it? That's one of the ones I know of.
Oh yes, yes. Okay, now we have our herbs combined in the glass. What we're going to do next, we're going to heat up our vegetable oil, which is our sweet almond oil. We are going to melt our beeswax. After the vegetable oil has been infusing for about 5 minutes, we'll strain it through, and then we'll begin the really beautiful alchemical process of mixing some beeswax along with our oil, so that we can get a really creamy consistency.
Lovely.
And then we'll have a proper, useful oil and cream for our herbal cabinet.
Lovely.
Right, to begin with, we're going to put our herbal mixture into the infused, or into the oil, which is warming in readiness. So we just tip that in and stir it thoroughly so that all the constituent parts are soaked in the oil. So that we need to keep here for about 5 minutes. The next part of the process is to strain our infused oil through a muslin cloth. I'm using my little net again. As you can see, it's been well used, but is regularly washed in the washing machine. So I'm going to strain my oil into this glass so that you can see what I'm doing, and then we'll get ready to add the beeswax so that we can make our salve. Okay, now this oil will be well infused by now. And so, in this pot, I have melted some of my beeswax granules. And what I'm going to do now, I'm going to add a little bit at a time, and then I'm going to test it as we go, so that we make sure we have the right consistency. It's important to be careful with the beeswax because it sets very quickly. And you don't want this to be a salve which is not spreadable on your skin when you come to use it. And it does set quite quickly, so you need to monitor this as you do it quite carefully. As you can see, the beeswax is, as soon as the beeswax comes off the heat, it begins to set. Okay, so now we're going to try it. I'm going to test it on a little plate, which is just what you would do if you were making jam, because the plate will be cold, so the beeswax will settle and chill once it comes onto the cold plate. So then we'll know if we've got enough. Okay, there's still a little warmth in this, so it's not quite set yet. Once this is actually cool, it will be, I feel, quite creamy enough to use. And if you just test it then gently, because there's no longer great heat in it, you can just see it's absorbing nicely into your skin and is soft enough. So you're not causing, because you're putting this on a bit of skin which has been hurt, so you don't want it to be dragged or drawn. So you want this to be a really gentle and creamy salve. So that feels to me as if that's sufficient. And I think it's about you testing it as you make it. Right, Jackie, we're almost ready to treat the walking wounded. So we're going to put some of our mix into a jar. And what I think is rather nice to do is to add a few drops of essential oil, which will give it a nice fragrance.
Yeah. And which oil is that you're putting in
I'm using chamomile.
And that's really good for the skin as well, isn't it?
Which is also very good.
And I'm assuming you can also put lavender because you've used lavender.
You can put lavender. Yeah. I mean, you don't have to, but it is quite nice. You've got something fragrant as well to add.
And then the essential oils themselves help to work on the skin as well. So, I mean, it all helps, doesn't it?
Yes. And just a few drops is more than enough because the essential oils are actually very potent.
Yes, they are.
So as we speak, this is beginning to set. And of course, once it cools down completely, it will be set. As you can actually see, it's
getting there now.
Very nicely.
Can I try some?
You can indeed.
It smells lovely. That's really soft already on the skin. It's very soft, yes. It's really lovely. And it smells good.
And it will ease whatever ailment you have there.
And of course, there are lots of different kind of recipes for oils and salves and that kind of thing. Yes. So that's a basic way of making a simple salve, isn't it?
And there are many other herbs. Plantain, for example, if you've got a really nasty cut or something, is very, very good. Lots of excellent herbs can be used. But if you for example, the other day I was rather preoccupied and rather foolishly put my hand onto the cooker after I'd switched it off, but the heat was still there, and I was very quick under the tap. Cold water.
But it still blisters, doesn't it?
Yes, you have to get under the tap because what happens is your skin continues to cook. Under the tap, for quite a while, cold water just to chill it down, and then
the salve on top.
Top. And it really, I didn't have a blister.
Thank you. Brilliant. So the list is endless. The most important thing is to have fun with them and to enjoy what you're doing and not to be scared to experiment. This film has been a small attempt at introducing the beginner to the fascinating world of herbs and magic. It can only ever be an introduction to the subject of herbalism, both magical and medicinal. This subject is vast and it can take many years to master. What this film has aimed to show is that anyone with an interest can learn the parts that are pertinent to them, be it magical or otherwise. I am by no means an expert on this subject. I just know what I know from a little study, a few good books, friends who know more than I, and a lot of experimentation over the years. When you study herbs, you start to look at the world in a different light. New plants become fascinating, new uses are discovered, your garden takes on a new meaning, and the world around you becomes a richer and more abundant place with new possibilities. It is important, however, to always remember that if in doubt, seek the advice of someone better qualified than yourself. Particularly on the medicinal side of herbalism, it can be fatal to ingest the wrong herbs. But if you are sensible and cautious and follow the basic rules, your journey should be a wonderful one of discovery, both magical and practical.